Hey, what's up, my Radical Squad? My name is DelmarshaeWalker. Welcome back to my channel, and I hope everyone is doing great today. A lot of people or a lot of countries are upset with Uganda because of the new law they're proposing that has to do with the LGBTQ community. And for some reason, they want America to speak out about it. And I think that would be very hypocritical of America to speak out about it, because the law is not a humanitarian issue. It's more of a social issue, or more of a how the country feel about their morals and their values. And you can't tell another country how they should handle their morals and their values, especially if no one can come and tell America how to handle their morals and values, because like I said, this is not a humanitarian issue. We have humanitarian issues throughout the world that the United States doesn't speak about. You know, they're not talking about. And one country is China, and we're still associating with China. We don't have all these sanctions. We're not, we haven't stopped doing business with China. And China has been like this for the longest time. This isn't something new with China. It's something that's been going on. And I just want to kind of show some video, and then I will come back and talk to you.
American father says during his final conversation with his own son, who's a Marine, on the phone before his son was killed, Lance Corporal Greg Buckley Jr. told his father he was troubled by the screams he himself could hear coming from boys being sexually abused by Afghan police officers on a U.S. base. So he is with me now. The Marine's father is Greg Buckley Sr. The attorney for the Buckley family is Mike Bowie. Thank you so much for both of you coming on. We have met through the television several times. It is an honor and a privilege to have you on again, sir. And again, I am so sorry about the loss of your son. We talked in 2012, we were covering green on blue attacks.
Yes.
And so that was the context of our conversation. Little did perhaps, certainly not myself or even you really know at the time, connecting some of these dots. So can you just fill me in on some of the conversations, what you're willing to share that you had with your son and what he told you about this abuse?
Well, the abuse goes on, but we are told, and they're told, to look the other way. And it's disturbing to my son, who was only 20 when he went over there. And is that they're not allowed to speak out, they're not allowed to make any moves on it. There was a time, there was 9 little boys that came in with Sawa Jan, the end of July. Then later on that night, the boys disappeared, nobody could find them. So a couple of Marines were told to go look for the boys. When they walked into Sawa Jan's place, they opened up the door, and they were underneath the covers with these young boys, 8, 9, 12 years old. And they were told by the superior to back out of the room and leave the boys in there. Now that's disturbing when you hear a Marine turn around and tell you a story about this, and the boys were crying. They didn't want to be in there with these old men, and they were told to stay. And they had the Marines back out of there and just walk away and just look the other way and not talk about it.
How many times did your son mention this to you on the phone?
He mentioned a lot of different things to me. The worst thing was that he told me that they were going to murder him over there. And I said, well, I don't understand. He said, they're going to kill me on my base. I feel it.
The they being the Afghans?
The Afghans.
Why did he
superiors.
think that?
They were just bad. He said that. He says, I don't understand this, what we're here, what we're doing. He said, these people, we're trying to help them. And, he got into an altercation one night with one of the superior officers that he kept on repeating in my son's ear while he was on duty at night, that they didn't want him there. We don't want you here, we don't want you here.
He obviously knew he was there for a purpose.
Yep.
He, according to you, told you multiple times about some of the sexual abuse, the screams he would hear. Your advice to him as a father was, tell your superiors, right?
Right, and then he said, we did, but there's nothing they can do about it. So it's very frustrating for him, especially, the culture that we raise our children in is like, you don't do things like that. And he wanted to do something, but he's a Lance Corporal, and his hands are tied. And that's what he said. He said, I feel like my hands are tied and I can't do anything about this.
Green Beret ordered discharged after he confronted an alleged child rapist in Afghanistan, has learned that the Army has denied his appeal. Last month, the Kelly File reported on Sergeant First Class Charles Martland and his fight to continue serving his country after he and his team leader got in trouble for striking an Afghan police commander accused of raping a young boy and then beating up the child's mother. Trace Gallagher live in our West Coast newsroom with the very latest. Trace?
And Megan, the memo sent to Sergeant First Class Charles Martland says that his appeal to remain in the Army is denied because there is no new evidence. But it's the original evidence that has made this story so controversial. In 2011, Martland, a decorated Green Beret, was helping train Afghan police officers in the Kunduz province when a woman came into their camp claiming one of the Afghan police commanders had repeatedly raped her 12-year-old son and badly beaten her. Sergeant Martland and his teammate, Captain Daniel Quinn, confronted the Afghan police commander, and Captain Quinn told the Kelly file the police commander confessed. Listen.
Then he started laughing. Once we described how atrocious this was and how disparaging this was, he started laughing in our face and just shrugged his shoulders almost as if to say, you know, it's no big deal.
Quinn, who accepted the Army's dismissal, then acknowledges that he and Sergeant Martland lost their tempers and threw the police commander to the ground. It was that physical altercation that got the soldiers in trouble. Even though U.S. soldiers are not required to report cases of child abuse in Afghanistan, today the Department of Defense strongly disputed reports that members of the military had been told to look the other way. Listen.
There is no policy in place that directs any U.S. military or government personnel overseas to ignore human rights abuses. On the contrary, we monitor such atrocities closely and have continually stood up for those who have suffered exploitation.
Spokesperson John Kirby yesterday still not acknowledging that COVID-19 likely leaked from the Wuhan lab, despite the Energy Department confirming so just this week. Joining me right now is Florida Congressman, member of the House Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committees, and a former Green Beret and Army National Guard Colonel. Michael Waltz is here. Congressman, it's good to see you. Thanks very much. So we heard from the Energy Department on this. You've talked about this a lot with your colleagues, and yet the White House still unwilling to poke the bear, I guess, of Communist China.
Yeah, Maria, here's what we know. We know that gain-of-function research was happening in that lab. We know that there were serious concerns about its security protocol. It basically had the same security as a dentist office. We know, thanks to Mike Pompeo, who declassified it, that the Chinese military was also in that lab conducting bio-research, which they have openly talked about using in a global combat campaign and type of environment. And I guess we're just supposed to believe that it was the world's biggest coincidence that this pandemic emanated right down the street, but not in this lab. So, Maria, what we need to do is get all of our intelligence community members that have looked at this in the same room. Kevin McCarthy has established a select committee to do just that, because the Democrats over the last several years have had zero, not one hearing dedicated to figuring this out that has devastated our economy, so many lives, set back so many others, and we've got to get to the bottom of it, because if we don't understand where this came from, we can't prevent the next one. And the last three pandemics have come from China and have been exponentially more deadly every time.
It's just really disturbing that the White House appears afraid of Xi Jinping, walks on eggshells around Communist China. And what you said is something I've been repeating many times, the fact that your colleagues, the Democrats, did not have one hearing on the origins of COVID-19. We are 3 years later. And is there no curiosity as to how this thing started and why 1 million Americans are dead as a result? Well, what's the problem? Are they all being paid off by China?
Okay, so in the video, well, in two of those videos you've seen where they spoke about pedophilia, adults having sex with kids. That is something that I just cannot stand. I cannot fathom. It doesn't make sense to me. It's something that I would never accept. And I feel like that is more important to be spoke about than what America wants to speak about, what America wants to protest against. You see more people protesting against LGBTQ, protesting for that, for sexualizing kids, but you never see the same energy, the momentum with the president, with people in Congress when it comes to adults trying and adults having sex with kids. It's like it's more on a hush-hush. When you look at what's going on in this world, in the United States, when other countries, it's like, when I was growing up, they made Africa seem like it was a third world country, because all I knew about Africa is what I seen on TV. And you would see all these people, they was always going over there for humanitarian reason. They would always show these kids starving, and they would always be asking for donation to help feed these kids. And so growing up, not knowing anything, and this is all I'm seeing on TV all the time, I thought that was the whole continent of Africa was like that. I didn't know. They never showed the wealth of Africa. They never showed the cities. They never showed the business side, the prosperity side, the growth and all that of Africa. They always made the continent seem like it was a continent that needed Americans' help, or if not, these people was going to starve to death, which wasn't true. And so they still try to put that out there, like African really don't have any morals or values, or they don't have, it's like almost like they can't think for themselves. We have to think for them. It's not like that. It's a continent with different countries, and within those different countries, they have different rules for each country that they want to go by. And if they choose this is how they want to live, who are we to say that they're wrong? Like I said, it's not a humanitarian issue. When you have people looking at America, and at one point in time, they did hold America in high esteem. But when you see them pushing LGBTQ, and you see what they're doing to kids, if you're a country, you're like, I don't want this for my country. So what can I do to not have this happen in my country? What can I do to show that this isn't something that we're going to stand for? This isn't something that we see as morally correct, or something that we want to happen for our country. So there's going to be pushback. In America, how dare you tell someone when you're sexualizing kids that they're wrong for saying, we want family value, we want to protect our kids? How can you then turn around and say that, you're doing it to your own people when you see parents standing up for their kids and the parents look like they're the villain? You're treating parents like they have no rights over their kids. They can't say anything to the teachers. They can't ask questions. Y'all want to send the feds after them and say they're high risk because they care about their kids. So it's like, take care of America first. You're still doing business with China. You still have open borders. We have problems over here in America that needs to be solved that y'all don't want to solve. Y'all have people over here with drug issues. Drugs are coming across the border. Sex trades are coming across the border. So this is the moral values that we have in America, that we don't care about kids. We don't care about adults sexualizing kids. You got to think about this. The people who are writing these books, they're not kids writing these books for kids. They're adults writing these books for kids. Why do you think these adults are writing these books for kids? Because they want to have sex with your kids. They want kids to feel like, yes, it's okay for me to want to be curious about sex. It's okay for me to want to have sex. It's okay for me to have sex with an adult if that's going to be my first time. They want to normalize that in a child's mind. Even if the law don't say it's right, they still want to normalize that in a child's mind, because why would you want to put all this stuff in the child's mind and have them do nothing with it? You're doing that because you want to have them to, you want them to do something with it. You want them to be sexual curious, sexually permissive, sexually going behind their parents' back, hooking up with adults so they can get off on their sick fantasy of molesting kids and feeling like, okay, it's normal because the child said, the child didn't give me any pushback. But see, these are the values that we have. And then we will look at another country who's saying, no, we want family values. then we look at them as being wrong. That's twisted. We tell parents they have no right to say, I don't want my child to be taught this. I want my child to be educated. That's why I'm sending them to school. I want them to learn how to read. I want them to learn how to write. I want them to learn math. I want them to be able to grow up and go out and become a productive citizen. But y'all don't want to teach that. Y'all lie to kids and tell them they can change their sex, which is not true. You cannot do that. And this is another thing they do not, because for one, a child is not going to, even if you sit there and explain it to a child, the child is not going to understand. They're not even explaining this to the parents. They're just basically telling the parents, if you don't do this, your child going to commit suicide. They're going to die. This is the only way you can save your child, which is not right, which is not true. So parents, please, 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 even if your child come to you and say they feel like they want their sex changed, don't let them do it. Tell them, hey, when you become an adult, if this is the way you still feel, you can go do it. But as a child, grow up first. Get them off social media. Get them back into normalcy, where they're being kids, where they're not focused on, because you got to think about, why is a child focused on, I'm not this, I'm not that, instead of just going out having fun, enjoying life, thinking about what they want to be when they grow up, what they want to do with it when they grow up. It's like they're too focused on the internet, and then they fall down that rabbit hole of people on there telling them, no, you could change your sex. If you don't want to be a little boy anymore, you don't have to be. You could be a girl. If you don't want to be a little girl anymore, you could be a boy. And they don't understand the ramifications of that when they become older. And so as parents, you really have to stop listening to these people who's lying to you about your kids being able to change their gender, because it's not true. And then this is the other thing that you have to think about. For the rest of their life, they're going to have to be on some type of drugs. For the rest of their life, they're going to have to take some kind of hormone. And then you're, as a parent, who are you to tell your child that they cannot produce another child? Even though that is your child, as a parent, why would you look at your child and say, hey, I'm going to put you in a situation where you may never be able to reproduce? That's not love. You're not even giving your child the option of saying, I want to be a parent or not. You're not even giving your child the option to say, I'm going to get married and produce a child from my seed. I want a mini me. I want to be able, if it's a girl, I want to be able to carry a child and deliver a child. You're taking that right away from your own child. And then if your son say, oh, one day I want, like right now, they might not even be thinking about that, because like I said, kids don't understand. But you might have a son that say, hey, one day I want to get married. I want to start a family. I want to have a son. I want to have a daughter. But you're taking that away from them so they can never reproduce. So how is that helping them when they're not even in the position to decide what they want for the rest of their lives? You're taking all their options away from them. You're taking all their choices away from them. Because once they become an adult, and because they used to have a lot of documentaries coming on TV. And they would have documentaries sometimes about people wanting to change their sex. And the people that decided that they wanted to change their sex, these was men. These men was like in their 40s, 50 and 60. And they went through their whole life feeling like they was born in the wrong body. They went through their whole life feeling like they was the wrong gender. So at 40, 50, and 60, they decided, hey, I'm going to go ahead and live my truth. I'm going to become a woman. So before they can actually do that, they first had to go to a psychologist, psychiatrist, have a conversation with them. Then they had to start taking female hormone. Then the next step was to basically come out to everyone and dress like a woman 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year. They just had to live their life like that before they can approve them to have surgery. So once they went through all that, because they wanted to make sure, because they're letting them know, like I said, these are adults, 40, 50, and 60-year-old men who felt like their whole lives they was in the wrong body. So they still wanted to make sure that this is something they wanted to do, because once you have that surgery, there was no more reversing that surgery. So they did everything they were supposed to do. They went to therapy. They communicated. They said, yes, I feel like this is the next step I need to take. So all three of them had surgery and everything like that. So now they're considered to be a woman. All three of them, after living their lives like that, whatever they was looking for, that wasn't it. One tried to revert back and get, things to look more masculine, stop taking female hormones and everything like that, because they was like, they made a mistake. And they felt like, it was like the biggest mistake they ever made in their life. And then the other two, it's like they feel like, I'm just stuck in this body. They continue to live as a woman, but they don't feel like a woman. They still feel like men, even though they're taking female hormones, even though they're dressing, even though they have a women name, dressing up like a woman and everything like that, they still don't feel like a woman. They still feel like a man, and they feel like they made the wrong decision. All of them complain about their sex life. They have problems with their sex life, because one thing you have to understand is the size of the cavity of the new vagina depends on the length of the penis. So if a person has a small penis, because they're inverting the penis. So if the penis is small, that cavity is going to be small. That cavity, the body, because it's a male body, see that cavity as a wound, and it's forever trying to close. So they have to always, they call it dilate, or use like, I don't know what they actually call it, but they have to, also, I don't know what the actual term is, but they have to keep something up in there, the side, to keep it open so it doesn't close back up. That's something they have to do for the rest of their lives. It's not like, oh, I can do it until my body heal and then I can stop and then I'm fine. No, because as soon as they stop doing that, they're losing depth and they're losing the size. So they have to do that. And like I said, because it's not a real vagina, it doesn't operate like a real vagina. And so a lot of times they can't have a relationship because it's painful. And so now it's like what they thought having a vagina would make them a woman, or having that cavity that emulates or looks like, or they can pretend is a vagina, which isn't a vagina. They felt that would make them more of a woman when you're born as a woman. It's none of that makes you a woman. It's your whole essence of being born as a woman that makes you a woman. And so once they tried to make those changes, as 40-year-old men, as 50-year-old men, as 60-year-old men, they seen that wasn't right. And like I said, one tried to revert back. So it's like, he looked like a very feminine male. If you didn't know what was going on with him, he just looked, because he had a surgery on his face to change his face. And he was taking female hormones, so his voice changed and everything like that. He's not growing facial hair like he was, so he just looked like a real feminine man. But then at the same time, he doesn't even have a penis anymore. So he's in a relationship that he can never like truly go back to being a man, because he doesn't have that anymore. So it's like he's frustrated, he's irritated, and he's depressed, because it's like I don't know who I am. I'm like trapped. I'm not a woman and I'm no longer a male. And so you're doing this to kids who don't even have the wherewithal. If these adults regret doing that, and then one became an advocate for younger people who feel like, oh, okay, this is what I want to do. And now they're younger and they made this decision. They regret this decision. And now they want to commit suicide. And he tried to advocate and speak to them and help them get through it because he's older. He's done been through it. And it's like, you know, he tried to convince them, no, this isn't something that you want to do. Don't do this because it's not what you think it's going to be. It's not going to change your life the way you think it's going to change your life. You know, you have people saying, oh, do it, do it, do it. It's great. But he's letting them know, I have this type of pain. I have that type of pain. What they told me was going to be a vagina is not a vagina. It doesn't work like a vagina. It doesn't function like a vagina. It's painful at times. And so it's like he's stuck. He's not in a relationship. And he feel like, you know, it's like he can't be with a woman and he can't be with a man. So it's like, who am I going to really be with? Because I don't even know who I am anymore. And so you're taking all these options and choices and you're making these lifelong decisions for your child and not even giving them the opportunity to choose for themselves. That is not right. Even though you are their parents, don't take away their decision to say, hey, I want to have a child. Hey, I want to reproduce. Hey, I want to see I want someone running around that looks like me so I could say, hey, this is my son. Hey, this is my daughter. You're taking all that away from them. So please, parents, don't listen to these people and don't do that. Don't let them fill your head with all these lies that are not true. And you know, America is basically Sodom and Gomorrah. I said it before. That's what American basically is at this point, is Sodom and Gomorrah. And then they have the audacity to try to be a moral compass for the world when you're doing so much immoral things within your own country that you want to look past. You don't want to deal with the drug issue. You don't want to deal with the sex trafficking. You don't want to deal with child porn in school. You don't want to deal with any of that. It's just so sad to see how America has fallen from, even when I was a child, you know, America was never perfect. But it's a lot of things that America would not stand for. And one of the things they did not stand for is messing with kids. Because I remember when I was a child growing up, and it was this book called, the author was Julie Bloom. And the name of the book was called, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. It was one scene, they wanted that book taken out of the library. My mother being my mother, she went and bought the book from the bookstore. And not only did she just buy the book from the bookstore because she wanted to see what was in the book, what was so bad that these parents was protesting, they wanted the book out of the library and everything like that. So she bought the book and read the book, not to herself, she read the book out loud to me so we could find out together. I wasn't curious, but she wanted me to know what was in the book. And I think, if I'm remembering right, it was a scene where I think it was like a masturbation scene. And I felt, as a child, I felt embarrassed listening to my mom read that. And then when I see these books, they're actually pushing on their kids. It's really worse than that book. It's really worse than that Julie Bloom book. But they wanted that book out of the library. And the parents got together. They did not call them terrorists. The parents got together and they got that book banned from the library. And when you look at the thing, they used to have book burnings. It was certain books they did not want, and they would get those books and burn them to show how seriously they were about, I don't want my child reading this. And it's like, now we get to the point where they're actually putting porn in school when porn is against the law. You cannot sell porn to kids. You cannot show kids porn. You cannot have them looking at porn. It is against the law. And like I said, these are adults writing these books for kids. because they want to have sex with your kids. And this is their way of pushing it out there and pushing it out there and pushing it out there. And they're trying to normalize it. And they don't want parents to fight back. They don't want parents to say anything and everything like that. But it's like, it's coming from a place of being molested, coming from the place of understanding, you know, certain things being in books and certain things that's truly inappropriate for kids. Understanding that a part of me died when I was molested. I understand how that feels. So it's like, I'm not standing here saying, even though I don't have school-age kids, I'm saying this because I don't want these kids to have to go through this. I don't want these kids to have to even think about this type of stuff as kids while they're in school. Let them be kids. This world is effed up as is. They don't need to deal with all this. So why are we going in, not we, but why are people going into schools messing with kids? It's like, is the perversion that bad that y'all have to now go to school and get them as young as possible to get them to live the lifestyle that y'all want? Just leave kids alone. Like I say, I know how it feels. I'm not saying this to be all political. I know how it feels. Leave these kids alone. Let them be kids. And America, mind your business. Unless you're gonna really stop child sex trafficking, unless you're gonna stop drug trafficking, unless you're gonna be over there worried about true humanitarian issues, don't try to put your morals and values on other people when you really have no morals and values. And that's basically all I have to say. Peace.